Good afternoon. On behalf of the family of Dr. Mark Dunphy, thank you for being with us today as we celebrate a life that meant so much to everyone who was blessed to know him. I believe these few moments we will share together today will give us an opportunity to remember, to celebrate, to mourn, to laugh, and to cry. And I can't help but believe that our friend Mark Dunphy will be smiling down upon us, knowing that he has once again been able to elicit such emotion from his audience. As we look ahead into the order of service today, please note that a time has been set aside for you to come forward if you would like to share a memory or some remarks pertaining to the impact Dr. Dunphy had on your life. Mark Raymond Dunphy was born February 13th, 1950 in Boston, Massachusetts. He died on December 12th, 2016. He was 66 years old. He was preceded in death by his father, John Dunphy. He is survived by his mother, Georgina Byers Cuthbert, his wife, Judith Ann Ewart Dunphy of Columbia, Kentucky, a daughter, Gina Collins, and her husband, Joe, two stepsons, Daniel Tisher of Columbia and David Tisher of Breeding. Other survivors include two brothers, John Dunphy of Greenfield, Massachusetts, and Steve Dunphy of Chicago, Illinois, and his pride and joy, his two grandsons, Miles and Luke Collins, both of Columbia. Dr. Dunphy earned a bachelor's and master's degree from Lone Mountain College in California and a doctorate in education from the University of Tulsa. He dedicated 24 years of his teaching career to the students of Lindsey Wilson College. He was a member of the Good Shepherd Catholic Church here in Columbia.
I was told that Dr. Dunphy very much so liked Celtic music. So first I will sing a song, and it's familiar to a lot of people, so if you want to hum along or sing along, then feel free to do so. Oh, Danny boy, the pipes are calling from glen to glen and down the mountainside. The summer's gone and all the roses falling. 'Tis you must go and I must bide. But come ye back when summer's in the meadow, or when the valley's hushed and white with snow, and I'll be here in sunshine or in shadow. Oh, Danny boy, I love you so. But if he come and all the roses dying, and I am dead, as dead I well may be, you'll come and find the place where I am lying, and kneel and say an Ave there for me. But come ye back when summer's in the meadow, or when the valley's hushed and white with snow. I'll be here in sunshine or in shadow. Oh, Danny boy, I love you so. And I shall feel though soft you tread above me, and then my grave will richer, sweeter be, for you will bend and tell me that I shall rest in peace until you come to me. And I shall rest in peace until you come to me.
Thank you, Abby. What a beautiful version of Danny Boy. It was absolutely perfect. You know, I met Mark Dunphy for the first time in the spring of 1992, some 25 years ago. In fact, I was his campus tour guide during his interview for the VP for Academic Affairs position that he was seeking. And while he ended up not being offered that particular position, it was clear to all of us that met him that beautiful spring day that Mark Dunphy belonged at Lindsey Wilson College. He understood our mission. He knew what it meant to actively care because he lived it year after year and day after day. He was beloved by his students. Some of you have traveled many miles to be here today. If you were a student of Mark Dunphy, would you please raise your hand or stand? There you go. That's a lot of people who have traveled back to be with us today. And one of the things that brought a smile to his face was an article from 2007 in The View, our student newspaper, announcing the top 10 things to know about Lindsey Wilson College, with the number one answer being, take a Mark Dunphy class. And while I never had that privilege, I always look forward to our sidewalk chats. It was not unusual for Mark to walk me to my car or to the house, or for me to walk with him to the sub or to the Slider building. But then again, that's who Mark Dunphy was. He was fully engaged when you were in his presence. He didn't teach his class and then go home. He was at soccer games, involved with Lindsey Idol, served on the president's cabinet, was the keynote speaker at the senior banquet, the Black Student Union banquet, and was named Teacher of the Year by the Student Government Association in 2005. I would like to close by reading some of his own words from his cover letter dated February 15th, 1992. It's a helpful reminder to all of us, and hopefully you can hear his voice in the words I speak. Dr. Dunphy wrote, "Faculty and staff must be sensitive to the numerous barriers that frequently confront the low-income, rurally isolated student, and recognize the unique value of each student, and nurture her sense of self and worth. Students must be valued in their own right, both as individuals and as fellow creatures of God. Thus, a felt sense of compassion is absolutely essential in order to address the needs of underprepared students. I feel my life's mission is to be of service to a college whose students are from culturally distinct backgrounds, and I possess the requisite qualities of compassion, sensitivity, and mind to do so. I know that I would personally thrive at your institution, and I would do all in my best power to enable all those to whom I serve and work with to thrive as well. To thrive as well." Well done, my friend. Mission accomplished.
not going to read it, but I've got to take Moby Dick up with me to do that. Personally, Mark played a central role in one of the most important transitions of my life, my coming to Lindsey in 1998. And it's that moment and a couple others that really left a good mark on me that I wanted to share, because they were really Mark. I was at Purdue. I'd finished my doctorate. I was teaching part-time, going on through the job search. And at that time, Mark was head of the English program and humanities division. So when the telephone rang in our married student housing apartment, Mark's voice was the voice at the other end of the phone. His was the first voice I ever heard from Lindsey Wilson College. And it was a voice that connected, that made me feel at home, that certainly sold me on the mission of the college. Mark, too, was the one who oversaw my campus interview. And, to me, the one Mark moment out of that I'll always treasure, he was driving me back to the Greyhound station. That was how I'd come down for the interview. And as he was driving back, and we were talking about, possibilities, and classes I might teach and things like that, I was really sort of cautious because I had some near misses in interviews before, and so I didn't want to be assuming anything. And so I'd say things like, well, if it works out, because I didn't want to set myself up to get hurt. And, Mark asked me what that was about, and I said, well, I don't want to assume that I'm going to get the job. And Mark turned to me and said, well, if I have anything to say about it, you will. And I cannot begin to tell you how much that meant to me. A long job search really takes it out of you. And so to know that somebody values you. And I think that's, the same thing that you were talking about, that care and concern. I was valued. And that showed itself when we would run into each other, not literally, but like when he would stop by the house, or when I'd run into him in the coffee shop, when we had those. Mark was the sort of person, he'd remember what you liked, remember what you read. And if Mark had read something about Henry Fielding and Melville, he'd make a point to remember and tell me about it. Or if he'd read something about Japan, and if he could, he'd cut out the article, and gave it to me. That sort of consideration was just a wonderful part of who he was. When my son Ken was moving toward the Catholic Church, Mark took the time to talk to Father Dan at the church about him, and was very happy when Ken made that move. And for many years since then, he would joke with me frequently that he would get the rest of us. And who knows, you might, okay? And then we'll enjoy the laugh together. And one last thing, and all of us could go on sharing things forever, and we want to leave time for others too. Mark is one of those people who gave a word of advice that really helps and takes deep root. When I had just become division chair, we had a candidate to whom we offered a job, and who, after waffling for quite a while, backed out. And there was a bit of consternation and a bit of rough water, especially for a new division chair. And I remember Mark sent me this email, which, as I told him, I have read every semester since, for the useful advice. And I will read it verbatim, knowing that Mark would probably take a little pleasure in watching me squirm a little bit with the as he said, Mark wrote, "Amen. Isn't being a chair great? Always expect the unexpected, and always expect others to think nearly everything is a effing emergency." this non-return, and he put the asterisks there. Okay, so it could have meant faltering. Okay, this non-returnal of a contract ain't nothing. Keep the faith. And I've read that and kept that with me. Just one of many. My life's better because I knew Mark. So.
I think I have a little different take on some of this than perhaps others. I'm honored to be here today, and I thank Gina, Judith, so nice to see you, Mark's family, Randy, who helped put this together. I think Mark would have been quite gratified to see such a group that came here to honor him and remember him. And I could spend at least, I was going to say an hour, but probably a day sharing stories and anecdotes about my good friend Mark. Yes, he was a respected scholar and a popular teacher of American literature and culture. But in thinking of something like a theme that would organize what I wanted to say today, and so I don't spend several days up here, most of you, maybe you could go in shifts or something, but so in thinking about some way to organize what I wanted to say, it was Mark's wit and humor that I remember best and will remember. So in celebrating and paying tribute, I want to talk about liquids in literature. Don't worry, it'll make sense. Not only does it nicely alliterate liquids in literature, but I think Mark would find it appropriate as well. Beer, Mark was fond of saying to me, is proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy. That quote has been attributed to Benjamin Franklin. I can't attest to the veracity of it. I've seen it on coffee mugs and other kinds of mugs, posters and things like that. And being the good Irish American that he was, Mark's favorite beer was Guinness Stout. Brewed in Ireland since 1759, which he referred to as liquid bread. In other words, a kind of staple of life liquid. As a scholar and teacher of the ancient and classical Greek world, whenever this would come up in conversation, I would tell him about libations. The pouring onto the ground of a valuable liquid such as milk and honey or olive oil or wine. In the ancient world, the libation served two functions. One, to honor the dead as part of funereal rites, and two, as an attempt at conversation with or demonstration to the undying immortal gods. As if to say, this is what death is like for mortals. Once poured out onto the ground, it is lost forever and can never be recovered. Secondly, if you knew Mark at all, you knew he was something of an epic coffee drinker. And even that had a literary connection, as he would sometimes refer to a brief essay written by the great 19th century French novelist Honoré de Balzac called The Pleasures and Pains of Coffee. Coffee, Balzac writes, is a great power in my life. I have observed its effects on an epic scale. Coffee sets the blood in motion and stimulates the muscles. It accelerates the digestive processes, chases away sleep, and gives us the capacity to engage a little longer in the exercise of our intellects. Perhaps the most obvious connection between Mark, liquids, and literature, which many of you no doubt know, was his grande passion, Herman Melville's 19th century epic, Moby Dick, a grim and mammoth tale of Captain Ahab's obsession and revenge that takes place almost entirely at sea in the hunting of the great whale. And certainly, whaling is a liquidy profession. I doubt liquidy is a word because a red squiggly line appeared beneath the word when I typed it, so it might be a new word, liquidy. I earlier mentioned Ireland, and Mark was also a scholar of the modernist Irish writer James Joyce, particularly his stream of consciousness novel Ulysses, which is of course based upon and parallels Homer's epic poem The Odyssey, the original seafaring tale if ever there were one. Ulysses is the Latinized name of the Greek Odysseus. I don't exactly know when this interest developed, but I do know that while earning his PhD at the University of Tulsa, Mark worked on the prestigious scholarly journal, the James Joyce Quarterly. Lastly, I would like to share a story that involves another liquid, milkshakes. What? Yes, many, many moons ago, while living in San Francisco, as he told me the story, Mark was a letter carrier for the U.S. Postal Service. I know, right? Along his daily route, apparently there was an old-fashioned diner, and during an unusual spate of hot weather, at least for San Francisco, he began stopping at the diner to have a milkshake. Apparently this went on every day for some time and became something of a routine. For whatever reason, though, someone reported Mark to his superiors, ratted him out, and he was subsequently sacked. Sometime after that, Mark and his family moved to Tulsa. Again, I don't know the exact time, but where, as I mentioned here in his PhD, he took a job as academic dean at an experimental Native American college called Flaming Rainbow University in Tahlequah. Sadly, the university became financially insolvent, and Mark found himself on the job market, interviewing for the academic dean position here at LWC in 1992, as President Luckey told us about. As the story goes, Dr. Begley was president at the time, did not hire him as a dean, but told him if he wanted to teach English, he had a job. I guess the point of this story is that were it not for Mark's love of milkshakes, he probably would have retired as a letter carrier and never made his way to Columbia and Lindsey Wilson College, and none of us would be here today celebrating his life and paying tribute to my good friend, Dr. Mark Dunphy. I just have one quick note that I wanted to mention. The planter here, the white whale planter here, courtesy of Emily Gunberg, and were there other students who were involved? Okay. Found this planter of a white whale and the flower arrangement. So I wanted to acknowledge that, which I thought was very sweet and very fitting for the occasion. And also, as is fitting, this year's edition of Orpheus, the college's literary journal, will be dedicated to Dr. Dunphy and contain some of his creative work. My good friend and colleague, Dr. Allison Smith, who's the faculty advisor to Orpheus, will have more details about that as the spring term gets going this week. So thank you all for being here, and thank you for listening.
It's quite obvious by all the lovely comments that have been made before me that we are memorializing a very good man. And our hearts go out to the family and all the friends who are missing him today. And our remarks have all been a remarking of the good life of Mark Dunphy. I knew Mark for 25 years, that's a quarter of a century, and that spanned 3 popes and many conversations. Sometimes in my office, sometimes over a cup of coffee, And of course, as several have mentioned, there on the sidewalk. He was always engaging and amiable and conversant, and he always had a question about religion in the news. And I've always felt that one of the true marks of a scholar, or really of a well-educated person, is their ability to hold truths in tension and yet still genuinely listen to others. And on occasion in our discussions with Mark, when we had even differing opinions, we still heard out each other's perspective, and we always parted friends. There was such a beauty and maturity in his life philosophy that I always appreciated about him. It was grace in the midst of dialogue. And that is truly a lesson that all of us can learn from Mark Dunphy's life, especially as we juxtapose his seeking truth in love with the toxic atmosphere of the dialogue of the deaf that seems to permeate our culture right now. Let's learn on Mark's dime and pursue truth in love like scholars. For what comes out of a person's mouth reveals the state of his or her heart. You know, Christians often use the words of Jesus to ascertain whether someone has a genuine faith or not. Christ had said, by their fruits you shall know them. It's not our roots, it's not where we came from, it's what kind of fruits are produced in a lifetime. What did we grow into? What did we become? And fruit, according to Galatians, the 5th chapter, are really character expressions such as love and joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, and self-control. And I will tell you that I saw all of these in Mark Dunphy, and that's most admirable. He was a lovely person. I will tell you the very longest conversation I ever had with him. I don't even know how long it went. I think it was a couple hours, but it was because I consulted him about a reading I had from a New England preacher who compared a pulpit to the prow of a ship. And I wanted to ask him about that era from the 19th century, and that naturally led into a discussion of Moby Dick and went on for a very, very long time, of course, as a result. And I'm thinking about that conversation right now and looking at Mark in my mind. And we'd be in the most serious of discussions, and then Mark would pause, and he would break into that grin of his. Do you know what I'm talking about? That whimsical look that he would give. In fact, that is exactly how I'm going to remember him. The psalmist wrote that over the years, the lines fall into the pleasant places. I think that refers to wrinkles, and it means that our faces over the years assume the shape of our most characteristic expressions. The wrinkles just fold that way. And would you agree that Mark's wrinkles all seem to fold into a permanent smile? Because that was his most characteristic expression. They fell into the pleasant places. He was so amiable and so approachable, and that is very Christ-like. Every time someone we know passes away, Cinda and I turn to each other. We literally do this, and we say, now he knows, or now she knows. They will know whether the belief system that is fundamental to the very mission of this school is just a pipe dream or a falsehood, or whether it really is true. That we all come from God, and someday we will go to God, and that where we place our faith and how we conduct ourselves in this brief sojourn is of eternal significance. And so we say again with the psalmist from Psalm 90, teach us, that is, teach us who remain in the land of the dying, while Mark is in the land of the living. Teach us to number our days, that we may apply our hearts to wisdom. What a good life we are celebrating today in Mark Dunphy. We love him and bless his memory, and we pray for the family. Thank you.
Well, if you follow along in your program, you will see now is what Gina and I referred to as the open mic portion of the service. And I wanted to sit up close to the front so I could be the first one up. I have the privilege of being one of Mark Dunphy's students during his first year at Lindsey Wilson College. When I was a senior at Lindsey Wilson, I had him for a class that I've been told he's probably taught dozens and dozens of times, called Great Books. And I remember my first impression when I walked into the classroom to see Dr. Dunphy for the first time. He had on, believe it or not, a wool sport coat, I believe, in August. And he grinned at me and introduced, or said, "How am I doing?" And so we talked. But I enjoyed getting to know him so deeply. But as the years have gone by, there's 2 or 3 memories that really stand out to me from that first encounter that I had with Dr. Dunphy. How many years ago? How long have y'all been married now? He knew first. Yeah. 8 years ago, I had the honor of being asked by Joe, Brad, and Gina if I would perform their wedding ceremony. And so they were married on the shoreline of Green River Lake State Park. And I remember we got together for the rehearsal, and apparently it had just come to Dr. Dunphy's attention that I was going to be performing the ceremony. And so he came up to me and he said, "Randy, damn, I didn't know you were a reverend." And I smiled, and I said, "Well, I've been a youth pastor for a while now," and so forth. And he said, "It's good to know." And every moment I think that I have been in his presence since that day, he has always said something about Reverend Randy. And so that is a fond memory. But the memories that I will always cherish for as long as I have breath in my lungs are for the last 6 or 7 years that I've had the honor to be able to co-host Lindsey Idol with my partner in crime, Dr. Mark Dunphy. And I could tell you some funny things that he said from the stage during those nights, but I better not. But I will say this. I think, to me, how I value people or rate people, whether we should rate them or not, is, one, do they live a life with passion? I don't care what you do for a living. I don't care what your career is or how many degrees or letters you have behind your name. Do you live your life with passion? And 2, do you love your family? To me, those are endearing qualities that we can possess in our lives. Mark Dunphy, without a doubt, lived his life with passion. And Mark Dunphy, based on the time that we stood here on the stage and Gina was getting ready to give birth, actually it was the year before, and Gina was not yet getting ready to give birth to their first child, but Gina was a judge, and Mark decided to go on a 5-minute tirade in front of hundreds of people about how Gina needed to give him a grandchild. And so he led the audience that night in a chant. Was anybody else here? Is that anybody? Okay, we got a few in the back. Okay. But he led the audience in a chant that night. And he said, "What do we want? A Gina baby. When do we want it? Right now." And the next year that we co-hosted Lindsey Idol together, he had him a Gina baby. And so I'm going to miss my friend, but I will always cherish the memories that I have of him. And at this time, if anyone else has some memories or anything they would like to say about the impact that our friend Mark Dunphy had on their life, the podium is yours.
For anyone who knew me in Mark Dunphy's class, they knew that they could always count on the class being 15 minutes longer than it was supposed to, because we would always get into big conversations. And I always really enjoyed his company. I've had him almost every single year that I've been here, and I'm in the middle of junior year. And one thing that he was always very passionate about was Walt Whitman. In one of the first classes I had with him, he passed out a quote from Walt Whitman. It says, "This is what you shall do. Love the earth and the sun and the animals. Despise riches. Give alms to everyone that asks. Stand up for the stupid and crazy. Devote your income and labor to others. Hate tyrants. Argue not concerning God. Have patience and indulgence toward other people. Take off your hat to nothing known or unknown, or to any man or number of men. Go freely with powerful, uneducated persons, and with the young, and with the mothers of families. Read these leaves in the open air every season of every year of your life. Re-examine all you have been told at school or church or in any book. Dismiss whatever insults your own soul, and your very flesh shall be a great poem." And it was known that me and Dunphy would always talk and conversate. We could be seen walking up and down the sidewalks. And one of the last times that I ever talked to him, I remember I was headed to work, and I had a shirt that was unbuttoned, one button too low. And he told me that my inner Walt Whitman was coming out because he could see my chest hair. And so I remember it was at the end of the semester. Everything was done. All the stress was gone. And I told him that even though I didn't have a class with him this next semester, that I planned on coming to visit him, and I'm gonna really miss him. So, thank you.
My name's John Dunphy. I'm from Western Mass. I'm so happy to be here and celebrate my brother's life with you. What a great picture. I think it captures his mischievousness and fun side that we all enjoyed. I want to share a few memories. In high school, Mark told me that when he grew up, he wanted to be a teacher of American literature in a small college with bright-eyed, interesting students, and he found that here. He was very happy, and from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank Lindsey Wilson, especially his students, for sharing his passion and making his dream come true. Growing up with Mark was a constant delight. One never knew what he might say. For example, one night at the dinner table, my father asked, back in the Vietnam War, "Boys, what do you think of this war and what the president's doing?" Mark said, "If President Johnson would read the Tao Te Ching and Lao Tzu, we wouldn't be in this mess." We looked at each other confused, never heard of any of that. And after Mark explained it, a philosophy of compassion and much more that he explained, it all made perfect sense. I visited Mark in San Francisco when he was in graduate school. I did not know, Tip, that he was a mail carrier. I think that was maybe a 4 milkshake job. And I asked him if I could attend a class with him. He said, "Sure, there was a poetry class this afternoon." And they were studying or reading The Drunken Boat by Arthur Rimbaud. Each student read the poem for about 3 or 4 minutes, and then it went to the next student to read. And I looked over at Mark. He was maybe 4th or 5th in line, and his eyes were closed. And I was a little embarrassed. I thought maybe he was asleep. And it came to his turn, and he started reciting the poem perfectly from memory. And I was just so impressed how much he believed in and loved his work. One of his happiest teaching times, he told me, was here with Jay Stewart when they combined the class of Moby Dick and whale biology. Again, thinking outside the box. It's maybe the only time that Moby Dick has been taught from a whale's perspective. I have a strong feeling that my brother's journey to heaven, in his journey, God pulled him aside and said, or asked Mark, "Can we chat a while? I don't usually do this, but I'd like to share a fine cigar and a little glass of scotch with you." after talking with Mark and having a hearty laugh, I could hear God say, for whatever they were talking about, well, that's interesting. I hadn't quite thought of it that way. I love and am so proud of my brother, as does his mother. He adored his wife, Judith, Gina, amazing Gina, and his family, Danny, David, Joe, Luke, Miles, and all of you have brought him so much joy. So Mark, dear brother, goodbye for now. I congratulate you on a life well lived.
Hey everybody, thanks for being here. I'm Dan. When I was 5 years old, my mother found out that my dad was gay. They were in the process of divorce. Mark was a good friend of my mother's. He took on that single mother and 2 children that didn't even belong to him, and he raised me as his own. I'm going to keep this short and sweet. And, yeah, good man. I'm not going to sit up here and blubber.
Anybody that knew my dad knew that technology was not his thing at all. But he always got such a big kick when he made the internet, meaning that he somehow popped up on Facebook, or, you know, people were sharing something that he said on Facebook or whatever. He always wanted to know when he made the internet. So he would be so pleased today to see everybody knowing that, you know, he made the internet, you know, today. So funny. And he'd always say to me, you know, I don't think they're going to get rid of my ass just yet because they really like me. They really like me. Yes, Dad, they really like you. So he would be so pleased to see how many people like him that are here today. So thank you very much for that. I did not graduate from Lindsey Wilson College. I graduated from Transylvania University. I applied for a master's program at UK, got waitlisted for it, and had what I called my quarter-life crisis of, you know, what the hell do I do now? You know, I didn't get into the program that I wanted. I did a Google search for a job, and an admissions office job here was the very first thing that popped up. I was involved with the admissions office at Transy and gave tours and all of that good stuff. I thought, well, I always said I would never go back to Columbia, but maybe I could handle it for a couple years. I applied for it and was interviewed, and I remember Tracy Pooler asking me, why did you choose to go to Transylvania over Lindsey? Why didn't you come to Lindsey? And I said, well, because I grew up as an only child. My brothers didn't really live with me most of my life, and I said, my dad is quite attached to me. I think she thought that I was just BSing my way out of that question until I got the job and started working there, and Dad came to my office 3-5 times a day, admissions people, right? Yeah. And he had this knack. It's like he knew when I was working on a big recruit, someone with a high ACT, someone that came from major money, someone that I was really trying to impress, and he would saunter in my office. He didn't care who was in there, did not care at all, would saunter in my office, come around behind my desk, and kiss me on top of the head. So here I am trying to recruit this person, you know, act like I know what I'm talking about, and here's my dad, you know, kissing me on top of the head, totally taking all my credentials, you know, out from underneath me. And anybody that knew Dad knew that he looked homeless most of the time. I mean, he was covered in cat hair, his clothes. I mean, it looked like he had just wadded them up and then put them on. Coffee stains, so I'd always have to explain, oh, this isn't just a random homeless person. This is my dad. He teaches here, he teaches English here, and I was always so embarrassed because, I mean, as you know, it doesn't matter how old you are, your parents are always going to somehow embarrass you. I was always so embarrassed. But now, you know, that he's gone, and I read every single comment on Facebook, and so many of the students that I recruited to this wonderful college shared with me, you and your father were the, you know, first faces I saw, and, you know, knowing that I would be taught by someone like your father who cared not only about the college, but about you and about students. That's why I chose Lindsey Wilson. And so it's just such an honor to see how many people he touched here and how many students loved him, how many faculty loved him, and how much this college loved him. So thank you very much for the bottom of my heart for letting him make the internet one last time.
Dr. Dunphy was a fantastic and special person, and people like that can make an impact on you in ordinary ways. And several years ago, we traveled with the team to Oakland and had a day off, and Dr. Dunphy went on that trip with us to Oakland. And during the day off, we gave all the guys money to get transportation over into San Francisco, eat breakfast and lunch, and then get transportation back by 6 o'clock. So I think it was $25 or $30 that we gave everybody. So Dr. Dunphy got us $30. And we didn't see him again until 6 o'clock, and he probably had that coat on. And we asked him, what had you done? What have you been up to? And he started to take his coat open, and in different pockets he had used books that he had bought. He had 2 or 3 here and 2 or 3 there, and he showed probably 10 or 12 books. And then he said, but the best part of the day was this. And he reached in behind, and he had a pair of shoes that he had found. And they fit. And he was so excited. And then he said, and what's better is I still have $6 left. And obviously, we had a great trip, and Dr. Dunphy was truly a fantastic and special person and made a huge impression on my life.
Hello. Love that picture. I was reading a lot of the email thread on campus. I'm much like your father. I'm a dinosaur in this way. I'm not on Facebook, so you can tell me if I ever make the internet. Dr. Dunphy was such a passionate person, and John, you used the word delight, that he, and I was actually sitting back there thinking that earlier before you used the word. I was thinking every time I ran into him on campus, I felt like he was delighted by something. He was always so happy to see me, and I know he greeted everybody in this room that way, and I would often leave my house and suddenly he'd be there. Gina, when you were in admissions, he was often on his way to go see you. But when he wasn't on a direct path to see you, it was really funny. He always somehow had to go where I was going, and he would walk with me wherever I was going on campus and keep me company. And one day, we often talked about literature, and he talked about, Judith, how you and Gina had your own little book club. And that you all were always reading something together, and he knew how much I read. And I had to admit to him one day, because he was on a rather long tear about James Joyce. And I said, you know, I really kind of hate to admit this to you of all people, but I've never been able to get through Joyce. And he said, you've never read Joyce? And I said, I didn't say that. I've never been able to get through Joyce. And I said, it's just so dense. And he said, well, you've been doing it all wrong. And I said, how's that? And he said, you should read it a page a day. And he said, you can get through. So that had to be right around Thanksgiving. Our Christmas party is always right very early December. And he shows up at the door and leaves a package, which Bill and I, after all the guests left, we opened. And there was this really sweet inscription on Ulysses. It says, to Bill and Elise, this is the gift that keeps on giving. At a page a day, it will take you over 2 years to read. Merry Christmas 2000, Mark Dunphy. And there was a second note with a card, an Irish blessing. And at the bottom he wrote, I bet you never received a second-hand Christmas gift before. It's the best that I could do on short notice. The good news about a used book is that if one never gets around to reading it, it gives the impression that one has. Merry Christmas, Mark. I'll miss my lovely companion on strolls.
This last song is another Irish song, and it's very traditionally popular as an end-of-the-night song after a big party with friends and family. It's called Parting Glass, and it's very fitting with Dr. Shanklin's, what he shared about liquids. And the words that appear over and over again say, so fill to me the parting glass, good night and joy be with you all. So maybe we're filling his glass with coffee or Guinness or, I don't know, whatever liquid, libations, milkshakes. But this is a great song that's just full of joy in life for the people that you love. Of all the money that ever I've had, I spent it in good company, and all the harm that ever I've done, alas, it was to none but me. And all I've done for want of wit, to memory now I can't recall. So fill to me the parting glass, good night and joy be with you all. Of all the comrades that e'er I've had, they're sorry for my going away, and all the sweethearts that ever I've had, they'd wish me one more day to stay. But since it fell unto my lot that I should rise and you should not, I gently rise and softly call, good night and joy be with you all. So fill to me the parting glass, and drink a health whatever befalls, and gently rise and softly call, good night and joy be with you all. But since it fell unto my lot that I should rise I gently rise, and I'll softly call, good night and joy be with you all. So fill to me the parting glass, and drink a health, whatever befall, and gently rise, and I'll softly call, good night and joy be with you all. Good night and joy be with you all.
Is that taping?
No.
I think it's really a novel about identity. There's a line that's not often picked up in the, oh, my sandwich.
Okay, we'll start over again. We'll start over again. Just put it there. Did you like the novel the first time you read it?
Oh,
what
yeah,
was your reaction
yeah.
the first
Blew me
time?
away. Blew me away. And I've probably read it 50 times since then. One year I read it every season, 4 times a year. But I made a goal to read it at least once a year, and I think I have. Sometimes twice a year, sometimes 1 year, 4 times a year.
Bling, that can only mean one thing. Yes. Ever since I left the city, you got a reputation for yourself, though. Hell yeah, I do.
But there's another parallel between the Beats and Melville. This emphasis on automatic writing or spontaneous prose without revision. In fact, Allen Ginsberg once told me, but he's told this to a lot of other people too, when I had dinner with him, first thought, best thought. In fact, I often tell my students in terms of composing their first drafts is don't allow that internal censor to intrude. This is not the place where you worry about punctuation and spelling and getting the le mot juste, the right word in the right place. You just need to get thoughts down on paper.
What a beautiful service this has been. For our closing prayer, let us all stand silently at first to honor the memory of Dr. Mark Dunphy. And then I will lead in a prayer and we will be dismissed. Let us pray. Gracious God, we thank you for this life of this very good man. Inspire us to have lives well lived also, to honor you as we have honored Mark's legacy today. This we pray in your merciful name. Amen. Thank you, and you are dismissed.